When you think you're the ugliest person in the world, do you love yourself despite that and accept that your inner beauty is more important? Do you use your own face as B-roll? What the hell? No, you found a cult dedicated to stealing eyeballs so that no one can ever see you again, like a normal person would. Meet Lumi, the charismatic doctor that's recruiting for his ideology, don't see meism, even though it'll make his fellow survivors so much worse and make his life hell. His apparently uncouth desires got him exiled from his last tribe, and now he's starting fresh on Strive to Survive difficulty with dreams of grandeur but nothing to his name. The man quickly moves into some local ruins. If you ignore the sarcophagi, it's a cozy enough place to call home, but since even that invites jealous raiders in Rimworld, he builds a basic trap and fashions a short bow to poke some eyes out. He's unfortunately not quite good enough with plants to grow the heal root this place will need down the line, but Lumi spends the days planting rice to eventually convince someone to move in with the naked guy really interested in cutting their eyes out. Hunting trips meant to bridge the gap until rice is ready keep being interrupted by predators that steal his targets. Even a rat is able to knock him a little further down the food chain, though he does manage to scrape together just enough to stave off the Reaper and to stop that mug from getting any uglier. At least being so poor means that scarier raiders pass by without incident, though Lumi still does have to lead the random mugger Archer to the trap he prepared. It doesn't kill them, and since they're a promising researcher and crafter, Lumi rescues them and tells them how sick it would be if he could blind them, while she's injured and trapped in a prison cell with no windows. It is good to be back, Rimworld. Lumi works on a proper stove to make feeding two mouths a bit easier, but as he sits alone in a dark room and stares at a wall in a totally normal and not at all creepy way, he sees the potential for don't see meism. It's that cheer, and also Lumi's hideous face, that finally brings Archer around to embrace his cult. Though recruiting her to actually work the place will take a little while longer, which kind of feels backwards. He works on preparing the base for when she does join, although removing a nearby door causes her to make a break through a different door she always could have tried to escape through. Days pass with meager expansions, while Archer's will is whittled at until the boom of a crash interrupts their serenity. Connor is a natural believer in don't see meism, and purposely crashed here to join Lumi, which, I mean, that's great, but he does have paralytic aplasia, which paralyzes him for the better part of a year and means that he probably shouldn't be in deep water. The dedication to his ideals convinces Lumi to recruit and feed them despite the cost, which means we'll generously call it a collection of shacks, can officially be named, and Lumi clamors to get it in a visitor's head that this is not a cult. With Archer only almost recruited and Connor bedbound, Lumi has to not only provide for 3 people entirely on his own, but protect them by once more leading a lone raider into a trap. He also has to make hard decisions, like whether to take the Empire's toxic waste, but since one of the rewards is understanding more about healing, and that seems pretty good considering how much surgery Lumi wants to do, he accepts, and the Empire even has the decency to drop their waste in the corner of the map away from everyone. Better still, Lumi finally talks Archer around and gets her to start contributing to the base, then anoints himself the official Gouger before beginning to work on preparing a proper temple for the rituals to come. Archer's work at the research bench can't distract her from the horrors of Lumi's face, and she practically begs to be relieved of her eyes. Now, being blinded can give them psychic powers, but only the usually useless level 1 ones, and losing their eyes is somewhere between crippling and really bad for almost every job. Their accuracy in combat plummets to almost nothing. They're 30 to 50% slower at most jobs, they have a lower yield when harvesting, and they mess up everything they do more. However, being blind does not fully stop Archer from continuing to research technologies, or from making Lumi something to wear, including the wig that the role of Gouger demands. But despite Archer's good progress, Lumi makes fairly little. He's too busy filling bellies and caring for the crippled Connor. Allowing a nearby faction to send Fog here in exchange for a book that can help him unwind is a no-brainer. Even if it is about manually impregnating boom rats with your hand, which I struggle to imagine wanting to read. Traders do arrive, and though they aren't the first to visit Nauticolt, Lumi's managed to scrape together enough goods to buy a breeding pair of goats that go at it almost immediately, while Lumi is still scrambling to pin them in. Their, we'll call it a loving nature for YouTube, inspires Lumi and makes him try to woo Archer, though it turns out that women who let you blind them rather than see your face may not be the most receptive to being hit on. Dejected and downtrodden, Lumi buries himself in his work to cope. The plans he make only coincidentally require sending Archer away from their comfortable research bench and to mine at compacted machinery for the electronics needed for a solar panel and fridge. Being blind rears its ugly head yet again though, and ruins her yields. So she'll first have to train on steel until her skill is high enough to offset her blindness, which will take about half a season. A wild man is drawn by the sound of her pick ringing out, and while their skills are too weak to warrant recruitment, they're arrested to instead further don't see meism. And sure, kidnapping a teenager is bad, but it's not like we're gonna hurt him. Okay, but he forced us to, and it's not like that little scuffle is gonna kill a... Well, that infection's kind of rough without medicine. Kind of a little fatal. Okay, but everyone can at least agree that the real tragedy here is that they never got to be blinded before they had to be sacrificed in the bloody temple. Poor Lumi is really broken up about it, though maybe not quite the worst off for it. The newly built kitchen is christened, and Archer's time as a mole culminates in the solar panel being built. It draws someone desperate for a meal and a place to stay this season, but while Jet is a great shot while she still has eyes, they're otherwise just a Timu Archer. Archer the pawn, not a bard that forgot their job zone. At least Jet can take over for research, while Archer continues mining steel and components for other upgrades to the base. Unfortunately, the sudden explosion of mouths mean that Lumi's pantry is emptied in just days. The goat pen is still way too empty to help with that, and while there is a nearby farm that Lumi and Jet could ostensibly raid to tide everyone over, leaving only the blind to defend the base seems ill-advised, and Archer refuses to do the doctoring work required to feed and care for the still paralyzed Connor. That leaves Lumi to hunt and be hunted, which comes with a few risks that fortunately prove minor. Jet's even there to help Lumi realize that it could always be worse. In this case, by throwing a raging tantrum that leaves Lumi alone to feed 4 people instead. And in even worser news, the pollution hotbed in the northwest corner is bad enough to draw dormant bugs that'll attack whenever traders are unlucky enough to wander by, because we certainly are not about to pick a fight with them. I mean, it would be suicide to take them on without at least, say, the tier 3 Japanese cruiser Tenryu, or one of the other amazing vessels you can pilot in World of Warships, the sponsor of this video. This free-to-play game has you taking the helm of submarines, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and even aircraft carriers in staggering 12-on-12 arenas, featuring monthly updates with new ships, maps, and more. I loved angling my squishy but destructive cruisers just right to maximize how many of my guns blasted away at once. Leading shots as they crashed into the vulnerable spots in my enemy's armor, all while dodging deadly torpedoes, made each sink feel amazing. The game's stunning graphics bring the battles to life, while the range of roles and tactics the different nation ships need to thrive amidst the chaos give you something to master, brawling it out either on your own or in a more strategic division with your friends. Use the invite code IMPACTFORCE and my link in the description to unlock the cruiser Nauticolt needs, as well as a bunch of other perks, another ship, items that'll help you along the way, and 20 days of a premium account so you can try the game out yourself properly. falls fading, frees up those tending the crops, while Archer throws a frankly very meager party to celebrate having mined enough components to build a food-preserving cooler in the fridge right before it's cold enough outside to not really need one. The next Lone Raider is easily handled. I said, easily handled. I said, there, easily handled. That is a bad sign though, since attacks are going to be rough when only Lumi has eyes and the attackers aren't just lone knifemen. The would-be assailant is captured, but since they aren't the cook or animal tender the base needs, their fate is going to be the same old blind and blow this joint. Or, now slavery is wrong, but is stealing eyes really that much better? Meh, never mind. They'd only go for about 77 silver, and at that price, morality is still objective. These slavers should really be ashamed that they are ripping Nautikult off like that. The frigid winter is made worse by a plague that strikes everyone but Lumi and forces them back to bed after most had just managed to start helping again. He's once again forced to care for everyone alone, and though he does a good job, the chores stack up while he's overworked. The Empire oh so generously offers to make things easier by taking Jet off of Lumi's hands, but after their trickery with the pollution, they're told to pound sand. That still is not good enough for Jet, who launches into a berserker rage because Lumi even thought about betraying them. After handling that problem, Lumi's left so overworked and overwhelmed just tending to everyone that he unintentionally starves Steel the prisoner into converting to the one true ideology. Remember, it isn't morally dubious if the war crime is an accident. The looming silver lining is that everyone's immunity is starting to win against the plague, and they're beginning to clear the infection. Things even start looking up. Mostly. Lumi can't really blame the prisoner for trying to make a break for it, even though he is going to teach them a minor lesson by leaving them to bleed that ends up being much more major when he's so overworked feeding others, harvesting corn, refueling fires, and kind of does allow that minor lesson to turn into something a little too harsh. It's important to remember that it's still not a war crime, even if it's a pattern of negligent accidents, probably, and only Rimworld can make me say that it was morally right to sell them off to a slaver for pocket change. What is way more important than some little accidents though, is that there's even a new potential colonist, good with plants and animals to replace the missing prisoners. That may mean more trouble with an empty pantry if the issues weren't partially alleviated thanks to a warg and a traitor killing each other. Though Jet is apparently displeased that they have to resort to such unsavory methods just to keep their bellies full. A few days of barely getting by in relative peace aren't actually ended when a raider arrives and takes care of themselves. With a slave trader nearby, they're captured, healed, and since Lumi learned their lesson last time, the new prisoner is just barely able to avoid being sold off as Lumi yells at the retreating trader to stop running. The cold chill and empty bellies are actually more of a threat than the angry, exploding animals that are able to be baited across the river and killed, where their fire might engulf buried bugs. Though even that brief break means that another pawn is starved into ideological submission. I'm sure Lumi's biographers will look at this great leap forward and the way he gently and kindly puts down those enraged by his policies fondly. At the very least, those prisoners still left like Ness are both useful and are properly wooed by Lumi's words. And in even better news, Lumi gives the crippled Connor one last cheery talk before his paralytic aplasia is finally handled. They stretch their legs and begin working the plants they missed tending to all along, though they will also help with building and with the animals for the moment. That also means that Lumi no longer has to tend to them, so he and Jet can address the empty pantry by heading to that farming site they identified to raid for, or not. Jet is a temporary member, so even though the whole reason that she has been allowed to keep those eyes is to be a good soldier, she refuses to leave. To think she could have been spared the sight of Lumi's face this entire time. though for some reason, blinding her makes her decide to leave mere moments later. And now, there's nothing but bloody footsteps and a few more eyes in Lumi's collection to remember them by. Fortunately, the walls are thick enough that the prisoner Haba heard none of that and is converted. Their skills are middling, and they won't join Nauticults, but they'll make a fine wandering bard that spreads tales of Nauticult's glory after their eyes are harvested at the temple. The ritual's only for members. Lumi can't even blind them with a medical operation, but that is not going to stand. A quick trip to the Steam workshop, one download later, and that problem is fixed with a bit of half-frozen heal roots, even if the first attempt isn't successful. Again, probably because of the half-frozen medicine, and the fact that the operation was done on the dark and dirty floor. Lumi stitches them up, then tries again, and it works, properly starting a macabre collection. With the Acolyte's conversion and improvement done, Haba is told to pack their non-existent bags and to shake off the anesthetic somewhere else. And while they do vomit as they stumble away, they'll probably be fine and tell great tales about this place. More importantly, that's one less mouth to feed, and winter's grip is almost gone, even if grass isn't growing quite fast enough for goats that have to be temporarily allowed to roam free to feed on the last shrubbery around. The year's end is marked by a biofuel refinery, which isn't something I've actually used in Rimworld before, but attacks will soon outnumber Lumi and his followers, and largely blind defenders call for unique strategies. As touch and go as winter's been, everything's turned out fine apart from like 3 minor hiccups. Amongst the new plots allowed by rising temperatures is heal roots to allow for future surgeries on people like Jenny, who is themselves a doctor arrested instead of rescued. It might seem like a bad idea to do surgery on someone suffering from extreme blood loss, but Lumi is just smart enough to realize that that means there's less blood to bleed out if something goes wrong. A child wants to join, but perhaps they shouldn't be allowed to. The innocent don't deserve Nauticult's unique brand of uplifting. Lumi congratulates himself on finding a depth that even he won't sink to by building a nicer bedroom. Not only is he greedy for one, and not only does he kinda deserve it for having to recapture berserking patience, but he's also the only one that can actually see to appreciate it. Even if he wants more still and starts having everyone cut stone blocks in their downtime to eventually improve his room. Research, meanwhile, has steadily progressed, and the reward is a machining table that won't be used until there's a little more chem fuel made from that biofuel refinery that people have worked since winter. The colony even has more people again. Ness will help tend to the goats, taking Connor off that, as well as help him with the budding crops, though she first memorizes the base's layout before she too is blessed by not having to see Lumi. That ritual gives her the psychic ability to make a light. How helpful. But she settles in nicely, working the fields and feeding one last meal to the blinded and converted Jenny before they're allowed to roam out and see the world in a new lack of light. And in case some of Jenny's friends come and show up to ask what the hell, chem fuel and steel are machined into frag grenades. Now, you might be saying, oh good god, why would you ever give blind people frag grenades? And I want to say that you forget to be concerned because some of them are also dementia riddled. But, area of effect weapons are perfect for blind people. The plan is simple. Throw lots of grenades so that it doesn't matter when each one misses. Admittedly, the first test is not great, but I will take no friendly fire while Lumi's just too fast to really test their throwing arm. The second test goes much better. The first grenade does enough damage to the bear that they can't catch up until they're safely led into a trap, and Lumi's satisfied enough to give grenades to the other blind pawns, who help when Lumi is subsequently trapped by an angry donkey that forces everyone inside until it falls asleep and is subsequently fragged. This is a genius, foolproof, and flawless strategy And if you think otherwise, then you simply can't appreciate true brilliance. In news that is totally unrelated to my silky smooth brain, everyone is starving. But with weapons that even the blind can use, Archer leaves Lumi behind to lead a raid on the farming site that he and Jet were supposed to attack so long ago. The quiet's good for Archer's focus as he moves on from unlocking guns that won't be used to researching turrets that will. The farming site is handled well. Well, I mean, it's technically handled at least. Connor and Nessa are still learning how to handle their grenades. With food hopefully taken care of, Lumi focuses their efforts improving the base, including tiling beneath the ground mural, because those dirt edges will irk me otherwise. It seems as though the acolytes released to spread the word have done a good job. A man wants to rest here, and a kid trying to learn about other cultures arrive in quick succession. Samson's a fine soldier, and while Darby won't work, the pantry is looking good enough that they're both accepted, so that they can be converted and continue telling everyone, everywhere, about the glories of don't see meism when they leave in the fall. An even bigger gift arrives when manhunting rats take out traitors before dying to quite literally blind throws that actually work amazingly. The plan to overwhelm enemies with mist grenades seems to actually be working perfectly. The dead traders leave more food, valuable mortar parts, and useful components, and this sudden windfall convinces Darby the Kid that not a cult is blessed as Lumi has always said, and he immediately accepts his blinding right, even if it does go terribly to both hurt moods here and damage relationships abroad. Still, that is a dozen eyes that Lumi has cleansed from this world. Some, harvested in the hospital and not temple, should definitely be sold to traders to afford real weapons, but not stockpiling these like a demented squirrel definitely seems like heresy. Despite the fact that that slightly hampers trade, Lumi's bedroom eventually ticks up to being very impressive. Builders add a barn for the goat's hay, a new food hall and rec room is built, and then they even install a harp that the blind can unwind with, all in quick succession. Lumi begins improving security next by starting a huge wall that'll ring the base and help funnel enemies into their grenades. Summer's End comes soon after with flickering lights, and the end is Samson's affliction with unholy eyeballs. But neither the ability to summon lights that only Lumi here can actually see, nor the far from complete wall scare off raiders, including the first with actual weapons. That ironically almost makes them easier to deal with because they stand in cover and let grenades blow them up instead of charging past. But even the infections they cause are easy to handle with a combination of Lumi's good vibes and medical skills. Though that and other distractions slow building, Archer makes good progress at the research bench. Lumi handles building the geothermal generator that she unlocks, since the blind Connor has a decently high chance of wasting the components, which means that he can help send off the now blind Darby, that child we agreed to teach culture to last season, to parents that'll no doubt have several questions about what we did to them. Things are looking up. More are spreading the word, and the base can even handle that scarier attack. So it is time to move on from just surviving to really spreading don't see meism. Lumi swears that there is an ancient relic named the Venfinger about, and announces plans to capture it to cheers at a party that's frankly not amazing. A few rooms are added for when the quest draws more eager converts, or more likely unwitting victims. The first of the latter is Henry, though they unfortunately bleed out despite Lumi's care. Deciding to be ambitious seems to be vindicated. The pantry is full as winter starts, and even 4 pigskins armed with guns are sent off with a flurry of grenades. The only flaw in this otherwise impeccable plan is that their weak throwing arms mean the enemy can get in and get shots off that cause minor injuries. As raids grow scarier, those same shots will be much worse, and so wood is used as a temporary stopgap for the wall, since cutting stone is so slow. And those attacks with scarier guns might come sooner than later, since nearby societies are angered when Lumi arrests instead of rescues their citizens who crash here. If components weren't so rare, mortars would be the weapon of choice for dealing with these angry intruders, but the veritable Skyrim guards, ignoring arrows lodged in them, can only be handled with smaller mortars that still do an amazing job at wrecking enemies slowed by the river. The lone survivor is captured, though they're too loyal to recruit, which is shocking because prisoners here are treated so bloody well, with an extra emphasis on bloody once they're converted. Even if Lumi does fail a couple of times, their target's eyes are eventually cut out, and another acolyte is sent to wander the world and spread tales of not a cult. With the temporary base wall at least done, I think it's time to make it clear that I do not build good defenses in Rimworld. Still, hopefully this funnels enemies into a choke they can be naded in. Some security turrets would be an amazing help, since they don't need pawns that have eyes, but there's still no components for them. Perhaps because traders don't want to come here for some reason. People just do not appreciate good hospitality anymore. Since enemies are definitely starting to accrue, Archer begins work on plate armor, though the next visitors to non-occult are instead... oh god. The next visitors are refugees that escaped an organ harvesting operation and want to stay here. The angry squirrels that follow them are blown to bits. And while these two are not the most useful workers, they'll maintain the base while everyone but Archer heads out to start finding more information on the Venfinger. Well, they plan to anyways. Lumi first has to cook enough meals for everyone, and then their departure is delayed by Ness's frostbite, then delayed again by injuries caused by a wild cougar that gets a few bites in, and then by a fiery attack that Lumi does most of the heavy lifting against. But after a little more of winter passes than they wanted to, Lumi, Ness, and Connor slip into Archer's armor and leave boot prints in the snow. The refugees escaping that organ harvesting operation make for terrible housekeepers that are going to be getting a 0 out of 4 eye review when Lumi returns. But the quest for the Venfinger goes well. The terminal containing the information is guarded by 2 archers, and grenades destroy their cover so Lumi can pick them off. Ness downloads the data, which is amazing because she can't see what's on the screen, and the group heads back essentially without any serious incident. Spring ostensibly welcomes them with the first piece of information, though a cold snap keeps winters chill about the air and forces soldiers to wear jackets instead of armor. Since that makes roving out more dangerous, work focuses in around the base. The new help is given their official review, and the scent of blood in the air draws a huge horde of manhunting beasts that charge past grenades and get quite a few bites in, even though they would just be gunned down in a normal settlement. The dangers that blindness entails prompts research into an autocannon to deal with future attacks, even if something that advanced feels like it is a long ways off. At least the cold snap finally ends, and armor can once more be donned. Though this second site is nearby, the terminals containing the information are unfortunately housed in a polluted wasteland fouled by the Empire settlements just upriver. The toxins seep into Lumi and his friends, as the fire traps left behind in this abandoned place force them to take their time airing it out, lest they risk being baked alive. The sweltering depths of the facility even necessitate rescue and tending to burns, which further slow them down, while those left at home deal with a rampaging donkey that traps them inside. Grenades mean that anything that actually gets into the base can't exactly be handled well, and Lumi is going to have questions once he returns after handling the last terminal, killing the lone attacker drawn to the smoke, and leading everyone back home not quite safely. Fully healing from the burns will take just a couple of days, but the toxins that leached into them will take longer to purge, and they leave Connor with permanent dementia before they're gone. But despite that worrying news, everyone eventually clears the toxins and begins looking for the third of 5 missions to discover the Venfinger's place. This one is fortunately much more hospitable. Fitz and Clue take advantage of the soldiers' departure to slip out, probably to stumble across a city that'll cut something else out of them. And though that leaves Archer alone, non-occult soldiers quickly take out the 2 archers guarding their new target, steal what's on the terminal, and return home. There, they finish the front entrances designs and even install a masterwork harpsichord to further enjoy musical pursuits. The beautiful sounds draw another visitor eager to join, and while Archer is just as good at crafting, having more hands to help her on the base is worth welcoming Lisa, even if she is in the wrong cult. That heresy draws the worst animal plague yet, and it unfortunately hits too many of the goats to treat, so don't look, kids. Lisa's arrival also draws 5 assailants, and though tox grenades blind their shooters, friendly grenades honestly do more damage to the walls than to our enemies. Lucky shots take out some, but Archer is riddled with bullets while sprinting for cover. A few more blows finish the foes, but it was much too close for comfort. Some basic turrets should help, though I'm actually considering giving my enemies cover so they'll bunch up instead of running past grenades. But though it was close, everyone survived, and Lisa is converted. It seems like the game wants to keep leveling threats up. The next piece of info on the Venfinger is guarded by mechs that probably can't be handled with blindly lobbed grenades, a bow, and an auto pistol if foe dropped. Unfortunately, handling regular attacks any better will involve components, and traders are still reluctant to see themselves coming. Trying to tempt them involves showing off wealth by spending silver on sterile tiles that'll help keep the lab clean, though that instead seems to draw a few vagabonds sent by the proselytizers abroad. They aren't super great, but they still can help out around the base and make decent enough guests at Connor and Archer's upcoming wedding after the two decide to get engaged. Poor Lumi has to enjoy the smell of love in the air. Or is that rotting meat? The lone cooler is not powerful enough to fully keep the summer's heat out, and there are no components for another, so the pantry they work so hard to stock is not going to be full for long. And problems don't stop there. The vagabonds Lumi let work for Nauticult's glory are having mood problems, since one is a depressed alcoholic going through withdrawals and thought Lumi's renowned medical treatments included rehab. Blinding him is not just a mercy. It also means their likely imminent berserking rampages won't be as destructive. No one can say whether it's Lumi's middling cooking skill or that rotting meat that gives everyone food poisoning, which is fortunately going to further weaken those rampages. Though the smell of vomit somehow doesn't give Lisa pause about agreeing to join Nautikult proper, or do anything to deter a huge attack of manhunting foxes and a single grizzly bear that just got caught up in the mess. A bunch die in the initial barrage of explosions, but more still break through. The temporary members are thrust to the front as human shields to protect from both bites and shrapnel, and through their efforts, the surviving foxes don't. The guest injuries are severe, and while Lumi tries to save them, Mogor bleeds out. Clavdia won't be happy when she wakes up, but Lumi's just happy he got Mogor's eyes before the man died, and that the departed's friend has become a new target for the upcoming holiday's sacrifice. The man-hunting pack of turtles that show up afterwards find out that their armored shells aren't enough to stop grenades, proving that slow and steady does not win the race against high explosives. The now too familiar sounds of booming explosions cajole Lisa's spirits into accepting Don't See Meism as the only way, and her blinding ritual even gives her the colony's first truly useful silent power, stunning enemies in the radius of a grenade, or the orbital bombardment beacon that Clue, one of the vagabonds converted and helped a few seasons ago, sends as thanks for saving them, is a great way to ensure that anything dies. Clavidia's blinding doesn't go nearly as well as Lisa's, but though that prepares her for ritualistic sacrifice, the text makes me think that there is an extra reward to be had if I first deal with one of the old terminals with info on the Venfinger. Editing me now knows that I was wrong, but only because Connor and Lumi leave a hungry Ness, and an Archer who hates doctoring so much they refuse to feed the dementia-riddled patient. Lumi really is the glue keeping this place together. Fortunately, his trip is not long. As it turns out, enemy archers are quite weak to bullets, full plate armor, and grenades. Lumi returns to save Ness, and to turn to the temple for the season celebration, though it's apparently wrong to sacrifice someone in a mental state over their dead friend and their own impending doom, which I mean, I'm no war criminal as far as you know, but I feel like I would rather be delirious if I'm about to be sacrificed. She does eventually calm down and accept her fate, though the ancient complex in the middle of the pollution-riddled hellscape upriver stops that ritual from revealing another that can actually be safely accessed and looted. That means that, instead of the sound of departing boots filling the air, fall's arrival is marked by the ASMR of paving more floors, then Archer's shout of Eureka! Finishing microelectronics unlocks higher tier technologies, though only after Lumi scrounges up the 10 components needed for a new research bench. He instead uses the only 6 they have to build an orbital trade setup, because no local traders here come by, and he's starting to think it might be his fault somehow. Lumi does try to begin improving relations with Pabo, a nearby non-tribal society, and they psychically realize that now is a good time to pay us to take some storms from them in exchange for goodwill and advanced components. Not that that'll stop Lumi from continuing his dark quest, or his followers from reaffirming their commitment to his mission by choosing the cramped hospital room he's using to take so many eyes for their wedding. Lumi shows that he's willing to help their future by personally delivering gifts to Pabo to say, "Sorry we blinded you, totally RB." The few gently used outfits he brought don't seem to be enough somehow, and so Lumi orders the crafting duo to work on some new jackets, and some foxes arrive to volunteer their fur, even if they don't realize it yet. Or realize where the people attacking them are. They sprint past the soldiers and catch a civilian Ness. She tries to run to everyone else, but a few nip at her heels, stalling her while her friends throw helpful grenades that don't end up being that helpful. The other foxes are killed, and Ness is dragged to the hospital, but it's too late. Lumi plans a sarcophagus for her, and Connor blames the tears in his eye sockets for messing up the construction. Twice. Lumi finishes the job, fetches Ness's body, and brings her to her resting place. Connor, meanwhile, has a sympathetic bout of his dementia, but after he recovers and the terrible truth sets in again, the survivors share a burial ceremony and a few words. It's too fresh for it to not feel lackluster, but Connor's medical connection to her at least leaves him feeling strangely inspired, and life has to go on. Not a cult will not stay down. A bulk goods trader arrives, and after moving some of the jackets meant for Pabo nearby, Lumi manages to buy a ton of components immediately used to upgrade to a high-tech research bench. The sight of pods launching up and down draw another child, but while the last one was denied for ethical concerns, the base is now safer, and Lumi's morals have really taken a nosedive either way. Besides, shaping the future generation is a key part of both legitimate factions and cults, and who can say no to a child that yearns to mine? Lumi wants to focus on using the rest of the components for other upgrades, like turrets at the front, but the pantry is so empty that he instead has to hunt before winter arrives. That food will be needed for the next crash victim, Martinez, who is a long-awaited cook. Lumi's had to do it all so far, but he hardly has a knack or a desire for it, and so Lumi eagerly sets about converting both Martinez and Fabio. It's always heartwarming to see a kid who reads of their own volition, without being reminded to enjoy it while they still can before their eyes are stolen away, but not everything is that cheery. 4 of the needed 5 pieces of information on the Vinfinger's whereabouts have been known for a while, with a 5th locked inside a terminal that'll be hunted by mechanoids. While I'd hoped to avoid this comparatively difficult mission, and get another where I just have to kill 2 bowmen, there's not more information coming in, and it's time to build an EMP launcher through a night made stormy by a desire for more of the life-saving components that go into it. Delaying that high-tech research bench is a small price to pay for the Vinfinger. Even if the EMP grenades the launcher will launch, can't help with Pabo's raiders, angry that the storms aren't hampering Nauticolt enough, and that we sold off the jackets meant to placate them. Everyone lines up, including Fabio, and the kid must have been playing some violent video games because he is quite literally killing it out there. Alternatively, my expectations might just be very low because I'm so used to blind pawns. The turrets don't hurt either, at least not friendlies, and the raid is the easiest one to handle since they were just lone club-wielding tribals. Between that show of strength and the EMP launcher, it is time to finally find where the Venfinger is. The terminal's called down, and Lumi starts hacking it immediately. But the storyteller sends some acid smog born of the Empire's pollution to set the mood, because they apparently realize this should be a more dramatic scene for this YouTube video. Here, let me just find some music. Perfect. The first robotic foe is a terrifying whirlwind of blade that Lisa plays live bait for, while Archer figures out how to actually use the EMP launcher he made. It takes a few shots, but he eventually nails one at the sound of the whirling servos, and the stunned creature is naded by his friends. It even drops components, which makes some wonder if they should avoid hacking the terminal and instead let more of these mechs come to farm these valuable items. Lumi dislikes that idea enough to throw a tantrum, and so Connor is left hacking, while the others take a rest shift until the next mechanoid arrives. Everyone scrambles into position and awaits. Why is it running past? People scramble back, but they are too late to save the turrets it descends on. The mech-on-mech violence does at least stave it off for long enough for it to die without hurting anyone, and let Connor finish finding the needed information. Though the hack computer does manage to send a signal off that starts activating the guards defending the Venfinger, though it takes the cold actually snapping Lumi out of his rage and his ceremonial outfits before he prepares enough meals to send everyone off. Fabio's left alone in the base, even though he's so young that he has to haul meals to a stockpile in the prisoner's room instead of giving it to them properly. Talking to strangers as a warden is scary when you like drawing with chalk because, again, you are 9. Lumi's trip is interrupted by, well, it's not really a problem, and they make good progress towards the Venfinger's resting location fairly quickly. There, though, they face the main problems. The building is surrounded by terrifying mechanoids that'll wake up when they intrude, and so have to be killed first using a cunning plan. It'll take skill, it'll take precision, it'll take a lot of explosions. A sniper is blown up by frag grenades, waking the rest who flood over into an orbital strike that Connor calls down using the beacon Crew gave so long ago. Everyone cowers from the absolute hellfire raining down, and when it fades, only one last trickler is left. A burst from Archer's EMP launcher and a few frags finish it off, and though the place around them is devastated, the Venfinger is safe. It's poetic justice that converting and sending off Clue to follow Don't See Meism has handled their worst foe yet. The day isn't quite won though. The main building has 6 shotgunner mechs inside that are ambushed ineffectively. Their pellets water the burned ground with non-occult blood, but the wretched abominations are handled by throwing grenades at the edge of their shooting range, where they group up. Lumi is left frantically tending to his wounds after taking a shot, but a few more grenades finish off the first 4. It's only while Lumi tends to the others' battle scars that I remember to check on the child I left home alone who's doing, not bad. Kids like milk, which is good because that's all he has to eat, and so the Rimworld CPS aren't coming. The final 2 shotgunning mechs die in a flurry of explosions, and Lumi goes to grab his prize, plus the gold coating that presented it for so long. Spirits are high as they return home, where Martinez still hasn't realized that he's being kept prisoner by a lone 9-year-old who's begun to starve. Though, given the gutworms the returning soldiers contracted eating Lumi's food, they are in good company in that regard too. And way more importantly, the returning soldiers bring the Venfinger, an incredible plasma sword that won't really be used for combat at least, since blindly swinging it around is heresy and a bad idea. It will at least make for a fine decoration for a fitting shrine, or for Don't See Meism's first museum. Archer begins researching more powerful autocannon turrets to defend the Venfinger from no doubt jealous attackers, while Winter's frigid grip force more goats to be cold to feed everyone, and the remaining goats are kept happy with an impromptu drug drop. That was probably meant for Connor's party, but everyone instead gathers in the same hospital room he originally married Archer in. This place is just popping, I guess. maybe it's just not my kind of venue. It doesn't seem to be Fabio's either, given that he slips out early and resupplies death traps, then wanders to stare at the sky. Despite all of that though, he does like it here. He's even following in Lumi's footsteps to excel at being social and being ugly. Okay, I shouldn't, but never be your hero, kid. Especially right now, Lumi desperately wants to unwind, but instead has to cook meals with the scraps in the pantry before tending to everyone's wounds and the flu he originally caught, then spread to everyone else around the base. It is a bad time for Pabo's raiders to strike yet again. The first foray is beaten back with a trap and a single good shot, but the second finds cover in both my bad design and the ruins made by grenade blast. They do die, leaving more vulnerabilities for the future, though Archer takes another few bad wounds for it, while Connor and Lisa take a couple of minor ones. At least that gives Fabio the chance to continue growing into his mentor's shoes by playing doctor. Even with their help, there isn't enough time to tend to everyone, and one of the prisoners die from their wounds before they can even be blinded. The other isn't much better. Between all of that work and Lumi having to continue culling goats to feed everyone while his friends recover, Martinez's flu gets away from him. Lumi wanted to cook on side, but with only Glitterworld medicine not worth spending on an outsider who might die regardless, all that can be done is to give them sweet, sweet darkness. Their sudden and completely unexpected berserker rage is even ended by the anesthetic coursing through their system. Blessed be blindings, for they really do solve all of the Rimworld's problems. At least Nauticalt's members' flus are under control, even if the latter's sharp fever have them writing something almost otherworldly in the chalk. That is terrifying stuff. Almost as terrifying and disgusting as the slow progress on the Venfinger's shrine. Lumi changes plans, and instead decides to display it in the temple alongside stone bricks, slowly accrued during Pawn's downtime. A piano originally made, then forgotten about long ago, is even installed in the dirty rec room to further spruce the base up, as they debate trying to acquire hints of another relic's location before ultimately deciding that they are not ready for it. I mean, part of that is that they are literally baking a child. Maybe enclosing the geothermal generator wasn't the best idea, though it is at least easily rectified. The autocannon at the front of the base they want to afford is a little bit harder, but not impossible, thanks to a vein of the needed plasteel that can be mined near the north of the base. Components are gotten by deconstructing a fallen chunk of ship, and Connor and Lumi eagerly build the temple up while Archer finishes mining. That leaves Lisa to handle the long overdue task of cleaning up the place, and she even scrubs out the shilling. Now, sure, that work does mean that transport pod crash victims bleed out before they can be rescued, but the base shapes up, and the dueling piano setup goes kinda hard. Days pass as the temple's floor is half finished and the autocannon overlooking the front is fully built. Both lend Nauticault their own unique aspects of a menacing aura, and I'd like to see Pabo try to come cause trouble now. Simpler bowmen than Pabo would send are the first threat that instead come to try but fail to rise to the occasion. The first volley from the autocannon kills, and the stragglers are easily cleaned up by grenades, while only causing a scant few injuries that Lumi can handle, until the autocannon's continued fire hits a friendly, while trying to kill a fleeing foe that just refuses to sidestep the door. That more severe injury can still be tended, but it does point out one of the flaws with using these blind but effective killing machines. The few stragglers not good enough to recruit to Nauticault's ranks are converted and will be sent out as questionably willing acolytes continuing to bring the glory of darkness to their homes. No, the next member of Nauticault is going to be Glenn. The attack following them surely can't be scary now that there's an autocannon, though their stats do end up being pretty middling. And the second researcher is okay, and she's still a good shot for now, so she's not useless. The attack following her is a lot harsher than expected though. Grenades stemmy, but don't stop the fire-breathing foes as they light up the night. Soldiers flee it, but while grenades hit stacked enemies, more breaths douse Lisa, Glenn, and Fabio in flames. Terrified and familiar screams sound out between explosions. The autocannons lit on fire, and Glenn douses their flames out in the river. In the end, the cannon shots and grenades do rout the enemies, but the entrance is alight, crops are burning, and everyone has injuries. Lumi works on them until the sun rises before collapsing into bed, but he's afforded only a few hours of sleep before he has to tend to Lisa's infection. Being a cult leader isn't all that it was supposed to be for him. At least the psychic soothe does keep him working on into the next night's hours, but it does nothing to Glenn, who's somehow angry we didn't save her life hard enough, and decides to do the unthinkable with the missed Ness's corpse. The disgusting display means that she is last in line for Lumi's treatment, even when they do get an infection. Though in handling her, I don't notice she's still set to use the best available medicine, and with only the Glimmerworld stuff left, it's wasted. Now, I can overlook digging up the dead and masquerading their corpses about, but I draw the line at wasting such precious resources. Most are converted to welcome the subsequent operation, but Lumi happily blinds this wretch before she's taught to love the idea. Unfortunately for not a cult, Pablo heard that whole, and I'd like to see Pablo try to come cause trouble now, and took it literally. The scent of fire still hangs heavy in the air as they arrive, and the ash falling down on them does nothing to dissuade them. All of this action exacerbates Connor's dementia, or maybe he just doesn't want to join the other injured, heading back to the battered front to defend their home. Lumi's infection knocks him out, forcing Fabio to attend to one of the worst father figures in existence, and leaving only Lisa and Archer against 5 gunmen. The first grenades miss, though the autocannon does not. The return fire downs Archer, and Glenn meets the ground mere minutes later when she tries to arrive and recover some kind of favor around not a cult. Lisa is left alone, but she handles it well. A great grenade kills one, though her next target has some kind of shield that the turret wastes its time on. She taps into that darkness-granted psi power to stun one target so she can dash from cover and grenade them. Her heroic display has her dodging bullets to sprint back to safety, then break from it again to throw grenades at more enemies. But this is no storybook. There are no heroes here. The now shieldless target takes a grenade, but Lisa takes a bullet that kills her on the spot for it. Archer's bloody trail grows as she crawls away. Glenn's bleeding out back at the entrance, and Lumi is still deeply sick. Fabio sobs over the man, trying to help, but with the turret out of ammo, he has no choice but to creep back and try to save his new family. The terrified child's shaky hands mean that they miss every shot against enemies who only fire warning shots back to avoid killing who they assume is just some brainwashed, desperate child. Their fight doesn't resolve before Connor snaps out of his dementia and ends the raid with one last grenade, but this victory is a Pyrrhic one. The damage done is just... Lumi will live, but Glenn dies to her wounds, which... good. There's still fire to beat out, hungry stomachs to fill, and an empty pantry to restock. Wounds are tended, and goats are butchered. Another sarcophagus is built for Lisa, while the sky fittingly darkens to unleash a dry thunderstorm that denies the survivors even rain to wash the ash and blood away. Lisa's buried respectfully, but Glenn, whose presence drew the attack that weakened not a cult until it could be overrun, gets an unsanctimonious hole in the corner of the base. Lumi dumps their body there, then, without washing their hands, returns to cut out a few prisoners' eyes as a form of stress relief. The oppressive malaise in the air and the smell of burnt flesh piercing the rainy haze ensure Lisa's funeral is terrible, and other problems are only slowly fixed. A rice harvest stocks the pantry a little, and while the autocannon can't instantly be rebuilt without plasteel, another orbital trader sells components for some of the reinforced mortar barrels dropped by a dead trader so long ago. Some are spent on a newly unlocked hospital bed to improve recovery and reduce infection rates for future injuries. At least their current ones are healing decently enough. The physical ones anyways. Lumi's busy cooking in the kitchen, which makes the notification about the prisoner's eye gouging failing surprising. But it's just that little scamp Fabio taking after his dad yet again. The guy's hands are barely big enough for a scalpel. More surgeries need more medicine that's still growing, but Not a Cult's members do seem to have survived well enough for Lumi to throw a little gathering celebrating that fact. The meager piece left in the last attack's wake allows the walls at the front to be fixed, and for the temple to finish being built out. It's even got the bent finger on display, even if Lumi's heart is still in the prisoner's room with his own scalpel instead of the plasma sword. Nothing seems to sate his need to blind all who've laid eyes on him and send that newly converted followers back into the world. For the first time in a long time, Not a Cult belongs only to its members as it tries to finish recovering. But though this has been a wonderful return to Rimworld after not playing since before there was even DLC for the game, I think this is a good time to call it. Not a Cult is established. There are dozens of acolytes spreading the word round the world, and Lumi's taken almost 50 eyes over the more than 3 years here. If you enjoyed a video, drop a like to tell YouTube how much you love war crimes. I'll be playing more Rimworld, so subscribe if you want to see more like this, and to help me hit my personal goal of 30,000 subs before the year's end. Then comment some ideas for playthroughs you think would fit my narrative style down below. Thanks again to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Make sure to use my link in the description to check the game out, and enjoy the thrilling naval battles.